How's it going, guys? So in today's tutorial, we're going to be creating this animation right here, much like last tutorial here for this month. This is for an upcoming course, giving you guys early access to one of the lessons. It's going to be much more detailed and talked through on the course, but for those of you who just want to learn the animation, here we go. So let's do it. So we're going to first off just go ahead and throw some geometry in here. I am using Blender 3.6. And then we're going to hop over into geometry nodes. And this one's going to be pretty detailed. The whole idea on this lesson is learning how to kind of create this Plexus style. And the bigger part of this lesson for when I was writing the course last week. I don't know how Alexa thought I called her. Okay, back to what I was saying. Back to what I was saying. I think I'm going to leave this in. It's a lesson for like shading. So it's kind of a shading lesson really because it's got like these two levels in it. But you know, if you already know the stuff, cool. But this is a really cool one, a really fun one. So let's go ahead and click on this plane and then click new in the geometry nodes workspace. And we're going to go ahead and get in a grid, which is a plane. They call it a grid because it's technically a grid. I'm going to click and drag here, size of 10, click and drag here, vertices of 10. Now we're ready. Now we're ready to rock and roll and rumble. So we're going to go ahead and get a set position. We're going to displace it first, much like last lesson. There's a lot of displacing here with motion graphics. We're going to do a combine XYZ. I got it right. Usually I get that one wrong. All right, now we're going to go ahead and get a map range. And then we're going to put the map range into the Z. And then we're going to go ahead and get in a noise texture, which we will inevitably need to loop. All right, so here we're just going to go ahead and swap it over to 4D, plug into the value, and if you play with the W, you can see it's animatable. Animatable. I don't know. We're going to do -2 here, positive 2 here, and so that's pretty aggressive. So we're going to just bring it in a little bit. All right, cool. That's nice. Now what we need to do, I'm going to go up here to the wireframe view so we can actually just see it happen. We need to triangulate it because we're making a Plexus animation. So triangles are very much Plexus, not squares. So we're going to do a triangulate to kind of fake it. So that's what we have now. Now it looks really cool. So we can go ahead now and separate the geometry, which we need to do here on this line here. Let's go ahead, SEP, separate geometry. We're going to go from point to face because we're separating faces here. And we'll get a, a random value, plug that into the selection. And then here on the random value, go from float to Boolean. Now it's going to work. Okay, cool. So here we go. This is it. And I think right about here is nice. Maybe up a little bit. I want everything to be able to connect. That's super important. We don't want any floating vertices. Because that's not cool. All right. Now what I'm going to do is turn this into a wireframe. So we're going to do a mesh to curve, if I can actually spell that properly. All right. Mesh to curve, curve to mesh. Curve to mesh. And then we need a circle curve right here. Plug that into profile. And radius 0.05. Make it nice and thin. All right. Now let's go ahead and create pieces that are going to fill it in. And so let's go ahead and get a join geometry. Now what we need to do is get in a separate geometry. Get another one. Put it over here to face. Plug the triangulate into the geometry. We need to get a random value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Shift and right click so I can kind of create some space and make it look nice. And then I'm just going to go ahead on this random value, I'm going to hit Shift D and bring it in here. And then plug that into the selection and then plug the selection into the join geometry. And then you can go ahead and specify how much. I don't want it filled up because we want some wireframe visible. This is probably nice. And then you can also use a seed value to dictate farther how you want this to look, which you can do that over here too. You can seed value the entire system, which is nice. Actually, this is cool. And then you can kind of preview the animation here. And then I'm seeing an issue with the triangulate, which I already noticed that I put the triangulate after the set position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit shift and right click so that both of these, and then I'm going to hold down control and right click and slice it, put it here, and then put that there. And I think that'll fix it. Yep, that fixed it. Don't ask me how I knew that. I just know when I originally did it. I mean, it's because the set position, this needs to be solid before we actually start. I don't know. That's the game. So now we have this whole setup. Did a little bit of troubleshooting live. Now let's go ahead and get the spheres to go on each point. So let's go ahead and get a instance on points. This is going to be the easiest setup. Plug that into the geometry. Set position into points. And then let's just get an icosphere. Do 4 subdivisions, plug this into instance, and then bring your radius down so that now we have our whole system. I'm gonna bring my detail to 0 on this noise texture so that the animation looks a little bit more fluid and up and down and really nice. All right, everything is done here. Let's go ahead and set up our sockets for material. So we'll get a set material on each one. So shifty, shifty. All right. So now let's specify everything that's going on here. So here in the material, we're going to hit 3 materials. This first one, click new. We're going to call it flat. It's going to be the flat portion. This one, we're going to call the wire. And this one, we're going to call ball. All right, so the flat version, which is these guys up on this top one. So flat, this one is going to be the wireframe. And this one, where we see the icosphere connecting in, that's going to be the ball. Now we can go ahead and head over to the shading portion of the tutorial, which is going to be a hefty one. So let's just click on shading. Now we are here. Let's go ahead and kill those 2 windows. I never use them. All right, so base color we're going to bring, well, first off, let's work on the flat one. Base color, we'll bring it right about here. Make it metallic. And then let's go ahead and do that on all of them because they're all going to need to be a metallic base. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hover over here, hit Control C. Then go to slot 2, hover over here, hit Control V, metallic. And then we're going to go to the ball, Control V, metallic. Now they're all the same. Let's go back to flat. All right, so let's work on this guy, make him look awesome. This one's going to be relatively hefty. So not really, it's just a lot of work, but it's not complex per se. So let's go ahead and get a bump node here, get a Voronoi texture. If you have the node wrangler add-on enabled, hit Control T. Object coordinate, and then color goes into the height. And then we're going to go here from 3D to 2D, and I'll show you why. Let's just watch it. If we go back to geometry nodes, because this is kind of important if you haven't had to deal with this yet. We're in geometry nodes, so this is a geometry nodes problem. It's not really a problem. You just have to go around it. So if I go here and I play with the W, watch the Voronoi. It's moving. See how it's moving? It's shifting around and weird. And that's because we're dealing with a 3-dimensional texture. So this flat plane is sampling up and down. We want it to be 2D. So if we go back to shading here, go from 3D to 2D, and we go back to geometry nodes, watch this. Now it's just flat. It's like an image. It's like a piece of, not really an image, but it's like a piece of paper, a flat piece of paper rather than a 3-dimensional volume. That's the whole reason why. So everything is going to have to be 2D if it deals with that. But we're going to be using a brick texture, which is automatically 2D, so it goes without saying. We're going to go here to Chebyshev and scale it up nice and big. Now, I'm going to highlight these 2 guys and hit G to move them up. We're going to go ahead and get in a Voronoi texture and then plug the vector here into the vector. We're going to get in a color ramp. Plug the color, very important, and then plug this into the roughness. All right, so now that we have this, we're going to go from F1 to smooth F1. We're going from 3D to 2D. and then Euclidean to Minkowski. And then we're going to bring that exponent up and then bring that scale pretty significantly far up. All right, so let's bring this in, and then bring this guy very close to the other guy, just like this. We're making kind of a galvanized steel. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit G, get in a noise texture, plug it here, bring the detail to 12, bring our roughness pretty high up, and we'll get in a mix color so that we can only use just a portion of this. Let's bring this over here. And so here's what we're going to do. If we bring this over and then bring this smoothness in, bring it something like this. We still want some smoothness here. If we bring the factor in, we'll hold down shift, we're going to add in a little bit of graininess, a little bit of roughness, which is what we want. This is nice. And then what I'm going to do now, I'm going to click on this button here for kind of to see a cycles view. I don't like how much contrast I'm seeing, and that's simply because of the roughness. So we're going to bring this up, and actually we'll bring this guy down. We'll meet it in the middle, like that. So now we have this really nice metal, very rough metal. So now let's create the other material for this. So we'll just bring this material output down. We'll take this guy and hit Shift D. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get a mix shader. Plug that here, plug this here, and then bring the factor to the right so we can just see this new guy. We're going to go ahead and get a bump node. Plug in the normal. Let's get a brick texture. And then I'm going to use this. Plug that into the vector, plug color into the height. So now we have this. Let's bring this mortar smoothness over to a value of 1, offset, and then we're going to just kind of bring it in like that, and maybe play with your scale a little bit. Now we have this. What we can do now is get a color ramp. Take this white portion, make whatever color you want, but I'm going to do a green. Plug that into the emission, and plug the color into the factor. And now we can play with this. Bring that in a little bit. Bring this up. We're going to do a strength of 44, we'll say, for now. All right, so now we have this happening. Now we have to mix them together. So we're going to use this mix shader to mix them together. So let's go ahead and get in a color ramp. Plug the color into the factor. Let's go ahead and get a Voronoi texture. And then I'm going to highlight these two guys, hit G, and move them up. Color into, the vector into the vector. And then color into the color ramp. We're going to go from Euclidean to Chebyshev. Linear to constant. A scale of 1, and then we can just kind of bring this in to reveal both. We're revealing them with this texture. There we go. Now we have this nice mix of the two. So this is kind of the lesson for the course, is all these different concepts. I need to go in and double check 2D. This is 3D, so that needs to go to 2D. 2D, and this is 3D, so that needs to go to 2D. Be sure all of your textures, when able, this is automatically 2D, are switched to 2D. Otherwise, things are going to mesh and morph as they animate. Very important. All right, so we finished the flat one. Let's go here to the wireframe. Just very simple stuff now. Let's go ahead and get a color ramp. Plug that into emission. I'm going to go back to the flat version. I'm going to click on this green, hover here, hit Control C. Go back to the wire, the period key there to bring it back. Control V, hovering over there. We're going to go ahead and get a wave texture. Control T. Use the object coordinate, and then use the color here. We're going to go from bands to rings, X to spherical. We're going to do a scale of 0.03, and then linear to B-spline to make this a very smooth transition. bring up my brightness, bring this in here, and then if we play with the phase offset, we're having a lot of fun here. We're actually going to go, so now we have this animation, but you can also, what I'm going to do is give it a distortion of 50 so that it actually behaves in a much more interesting way as we animate. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and highlight these guys, hit Control C, or you can right click and copy, go to the ball, Control V, I'm going to hit G to move them out, and then we're going to plug that into emission. Delete the texture coordinate, we're going to do an object info so that we can harness the random output for these spheres, so that we're going to go to ease, bring this in. Let's change a couple settings here. So we're going to go from rings to bands, keep it at X, so that now when we play with the phase offset, these are going to blink in and out, and then we're going to do a considerable strength here. Now we can animate all of this. Speaking of animation, let's just go ahead and start that. So let's go ahead and bring this up. Go here to the timeline. Let's just keep it at 250, have some fun. Let's go back to frame 0. Now make sure, if you go to your Edit, Preferences, in your Animation tab, your default is linear. Very important. Bring your phase to 0. We're going to hit I to keyframe, go to the very end. I'm going to type in 6 asterisk pi. That should loop it. And yeah, okay, so that's a reason. I like that. Okay, cool. And it should loop. Yes, okay. Now let's go to wire, do the same exact thing. Let's hopefully this looks as good as the other one. So go back to frame 0, hover over here, I, over here, 6 asterisk pi, enter, add the keyframe. And now let's double it this time. Let's do 12, 12 asterisk pi, and then hit I. Yeah, that's better. I like how that looks. Now, let's go ahead and save. We have not saved for a single moment. What was it called? Oops. All right, now let's go here to geometry nodes and animate this noise texture. So bring W to 0. We've done this a few times. Let's go ahead and bring up a timeline. Shift D. Shift A, search mix color. Bring that there. All right, let's animate this. So bring the factor over. I don't remember. I'm actually just going to double check on my thing how far I actually animated it. Looks like to 1. Okay, cool. So go back to frame 0. Here on the W, hit I. Bring your factor to the left, hit I. Go to the very end. Bring your factor over, hit I. Here on the W, hit 1. Hit I. Hit I here. Now that we're at the very end, go back to frame 0 and type in -1. And then add that keyframe. All right. It's perfect. Perfect, perfect. I guess that's the value of practicing the tutorial before you teach it. All right, so everything is in order here. Looks awesome. Now we can move into lighting it and rendering it, and we'll be done. I think this is the longest tutorial of this month. All right, so let's go ahead, Shift A, and get in a camera. Do something like this, Control-Alt-0, snap it to view. I'm gonna hit G, and I'm gonna do an orthographic. So click on the little green camera icon and go here to orthographic view. And then hit G to just kind of move it around how you want. And then we're gonna go here to the cycles view. Bring your world brightness down to black. Shift A, we're gonna get a light, a point light. I'm gonna hit G and move it up right about here. And then I'm gonna click on the light options here. Bring your radius pretty big. It's gonna be a very soft light and give it a power of 1000. All right, so that should light it. Give it a blue hue. And then here on the world icon, volume, principled volume, and we'll do 0.06. Let's do 0.006. There we go. That's what I was looking for. All right, and then maybe my point light can be a little brighter, maybe 1200. All right, we're here. It's animated. It's awesome. It's beautiful. I'm going to add some depth of field. So click on the camera up here, click on the green camera icon, depth of field, and then you can bring your distance And then you can bring up that f-stop a little bit. Orthographic view gives you very, very high depth of field. So you can either love it or hate it. I kind of love it. F-stop, we'll do 8. F-stop of 8. All right, I'm going to go ahead and render it. Also, just go ahead and render it because we're going to head over to a little bit of compositing. All right, so now it's rendered. I'm going to head over to the compositing tab, click Use Nodes, Shift-A and get a viewer node. Hold down Shift, right-click so that everything goes into the animation. We're going to get a glare node. Go streaks to fog glow, and then bring your mix down to like however you like your glow to be. I'll leave that up to you. Now I'm going to get a hue saturation value, and I really love the way this looks. So I'm going to bring my hue up until we start to get some orange. So I'm going to use Shift to really fine tune the orange that I'm looking for. There we go. And then here's what I like. The way the saturation looks in Blender. Very different from the way saturation looks in Photoshop. See how it like does that weirdness to it? I actually really, really love that. All right, so we're going to leave it here. It makes it kind of green and orange. I love the way that looks. We also got to learn a little bit about this. And this is the animation we're done. So let's go ahead and render it. I liked it. I'm going to go ahead and actually click on denoising data. We're going to go back to compositing. We're going to do a denoise. And I put it in the wrong place. Hold on. I'm going to put it in the front here. Denoise normal, denoise albedo. All right. So that's going to go ahead and denoise it for us. I'm going to keep mine at 300 samples right here. Here in the light paths, click and drag. 1, caustics there. And then I would recommend a PNG sequence. Just go ahead and save a folder. But if you just want to make an MP4, go from PNG to FFmpeg video, encoding, MP4, medium quality to perceptually lossless. And I'm going to render 1 frame. But yeah, this is what your animation is going to look like. Hopefully you like it. Hopefully you learned some cool stuff. This one took a little bit longer than the typical kind of MoGraph tutorial, but really great motion graphics sometimes take a while. And it's really takes a lot longer to make things like this sometimes. But it's now finished and now looks orange and beautiful and cool and awesome. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next tutorial, and I appreciate you supporting me here on Patreon.